Perhaps due in part to the mitigating circumstances of the world, of course I'm referring to the exact reason I feel the need to wear these all the time now, I've been thinking a lot about manga. And the reason I've been thinking about it a lot lately is when I was putting together my second shelf, I reorganized my collection, I just kind of took a step back and I thought, wow, 12-year-old me would just be so proud of myself. I just never thought I would have the kind of collection that I have today, so it made me kind of reminisce back to when I first got into manga, when I first started reading manga, and what my first manga was. So I wanted to sit down and talk to you guys about what manga was like when I was 12 years old, what it was like when I was growing up, what the first manga I read was, and pretty much my journey from being a 12-year-old boy who just saw Howl's Moving Castle and walked into a comic shop because he missed a bus, up until now, the guy you love to watch. Before we start, don't forget your gloves, put your masks on, and don't breathe or cough. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So like a lot of people, my journey into anime and manga started with Pokemon. And not just Pokemon. Pokemon, Digimon, Sailor Moon, Metabots, Monster Ranch. You know, these kind of shows that are obviously geared towards kids that at the time, I didn't even know what anime was. It was just a really, really cool cartoon. It had all this stuff that I thought was like, oh, damn, that's cool. And it didn't really click into me what anime was until I was about 12 years old. I had gotten a computer for Christmas and, hooked up with the internet, and I was downloading anime like it was nobody's business. I had just found out about Naruto. I had just watched a show called Chobits. I was also watching a show called Ouran High School Host Club, and I had also somehow convinced my parents to let me rent Ghost in the Shell from our local video store, which, looking back, fantastic starter pack for a 12-year-old. So even then, up until I was about 14 years old, I wasn't that into anime. It was something I was still kind of finding my footing in, kind of understanding and learning more about. And kind of sticking to series that were kind of safe, stuff that I knew that I already liked. Like I was rewatching Pokemon, rewatching all the old Digimon series. But when I was 14, there really wasn't a whole lot to do when I didn't really want to be on the computer. So what I would do is I would get on my bike and I would go to the library and I would fill up a really small messenger bag with as many books as I possibly could. Now one day I went down to the library with a friend of mine and we just couldn't find any good books. We were just kind of screwing around and we said, you know what, let's just go see a movie. Let's go see what's playing at the cinema. So we went over and we saw that there was a movie called Howl's Moving Castle playing. Now at the time I had not heard of Studio Ghibli. I had seen Spirited Away in passing, but I never actually saw it. So I said, hey, anime, let's just go see it. So we went and saw it. I came out immediately like, wow, I need to get into this a little bit more, I think. So after the movie, we said, you know what? The library's closed. Let's go try and catch the bus home. We'll figure out what we can do, watch more anime or whatever. And we went to go catch the bus and we missed it. Now, on Sundays back where I grew up, the bus only came every hour, so we were stuck downtown waiting an hour for the bus, basically. And I said, hey, why don't we go check out that comic store that's next to the movie theater? So we went over there, we went in, and you walk in, of course, like any traditional comic store, it's like walls of comics, figures, and stuff like that. So we were just looking around, killing time, loitering, as the law would say. And we made our way to the back of the store because we saw a group of people just make an immediate beeline for there, like skipping over all the other cool stuff in the store. We thought, okay, well, what could be so cool that's back there? And we go back there, and I remember it being a little small, narrow hallway, and then just this somewhat medium-sized room that was just packed to the T with manga. Now, it's important to note that the amount of manga you would be able to get in 2005 compared to now in 2020 was like peanuts. It's apples and oranges. Like, it's night and day how small the entire catalog of English manga was back then compared to today. There definitely weren't as many publishers that were releasing as much stuff as they are today back in 2005. In fact, a lot of the manga companies that were releasing manga back in 2005 aren't even around anymore. For example, there was Tokyo Pop, which is kind of still around. I think they're making their way back with some Boys Love and Yuri stuff. And there was a company called Del Rey, which, don't quote me on this, I'm pretty sure they're defunct now, but they were releasing a lot of really cool stuff. So the plan for the rest of the day was we were going to take the bus up to the mall, which was kind of on the way home, and then we were going to eat some food and then just go home. And I looked at my friend and I said, you know what? Why don't we, instead of doing that, just buy some manga and then walk home? He wasn't too into that idea, of course, so I said, you know what, fine. I'm gonna buy some manga and I'm gonna walk home. And I must have spent about an hour and a half in that store just thumbing through everything, just deciding, like, I only had enough money to maybe buy 2 volumes of something. And it was like, what do I buy? What am I gonna like? And I thought, you know what? I'm gonna try this series. And then I'd skim through it and I go, this one looks cool. And it was just a constant battle of just second guessing myself until I eventually came upon Dot Hack Legend of the Twilight, which is actually the first manga that I have ever owned. And the reason I picked up the first 2 volumes of that is because I was super into MMOs at the time. I was playing stuff like Conquer Online. I was playing MapleStory probably more religiously than anyone should ever play an MMO. So the concept of a manga that was surrounding a MMORPG really just appealed to me, jumped out to me, so I grabbed it. And I read the first 2 volumes, and I immediately went to the store the next day and bought the final volume. But I still remember that walk home, because from where the comic store was to where I lived, it was a good hour walk. I was 14 years old. It was the dead of summer. It was entirely too hot out. I didn't have any money to buy a water, so I was just slugging this little backpack home that had some books from the library, some leftover popcorn, and these 2 books that I bought from the comic store. I remember thinking, if I die of dehydration before I read these, I am going to be so pissed off. But nevertheless, I made it home. I drank entirely too much iced tea than a 14-year-old should ever drink. I plopped down on my bed, and I read through them. So, jumping forward a little bit in the same year, I had gotten a new job at a movie theater that was uptown, and in that same mall, there was actually a arcade and another comic book store. So I would spend my breaks and pretty much all of my paycheck at both the arcade and the comic book store. So what I do every time I get paid is I'd take my paycheck, I'd go up to the bank that was upstairs, cash it, go back down to the comic book store, buy like 3 or 4 volumes of manga, go to the arcade, spend probably a bad amount of money on Dance Dance Revolution, which, by the way, guys, I am absolutely a king at DDR, so don't ever challenge me. And then I'd buy entirely too much fast food, take the bus home, and read manga and eat hamburgers. That would be pretty much what I did between the ages of 15 and 17. So by the time I was 19, I had a pretty decent collection. It was pretty much filled with stuff that was entirely Tokyopop's catalog, a bunch of stuff from Del Rey, some other publishers that don't even exist anymore. And I've talked about this a bit on the channel before. I haven't gone too in-depth with it, but we're talking about the history of Uchuu Shelf here, so we might as well get into it. So basically, I lost everything. And it was entirely my fault. I'm not going to blame anything. I'm not going to blame it on an act of God or some extraneous circumstances that don't exist. It was all my fault. So because I didn't have that clean of a room, what I did with my manga is I had 2 really crappy Walmart desks that I put together to form like an L-shaped desk. And I had space underneath one of them, so I basically stacked them and just put them under there. Now my room was in the basement, and we had just had a water softener installed. And that thing, just for whatever reason, constantly leaked. So there was one morning I woke up and my mom was out in the, foyer family area of the basement. And she was trying to basically shop vac water out of a vacuum. And I thought, oh shit, what happened? And she said, well, the water softener's leaking again. And it had leaked pretty much this much water off the ground. So I went into my room just to make sure that all my stuff was unplugged, like my computer and stuff, which thankfully it was. And the unfortunate thing is I was cleaning up, I guess you can say, and my manga was everywhere. I just left it there. I was like, oh, I'll get that. I'll clean it up in the morning. And all water damaged. It was just all destroyed. And I thought, I'll dry it all out. I spent like 3 hours taking a hairdryer to it and trying to dry it all out, but all the pages were warped. Some of the ink actually ran on a couple of the really poor quality manga that I'd bought. There was one manga that actually survived. Let me find it here. And it is this. So I can kind of show you a bit of the damage. So you can kind of see the yellowing here. That's actually not from just it being old. That's from just the water damage. And a lot of the pages here you can see are ripped. The book is kind of warped. It's the one surviving grace of my old manga collection. Constantly kick myself because I had a lot of stuff that you just can't even find anymore. Like I had a manga called Go-Go Monster by Taiyo Matsumoto that you can't find for any less than like $100. Like it's just ridiculous. I had all of what Tokyopop put out of Beck before Kodansha rescued it and made it digital only. And I keep Kyuko-chan around as a reminder to pick my shit off the floor. So that's the story of how I lost that collection. But anyways, and by the time this was all said and done, I was just so burnt out on it. And I was just like, you know what? If all of my manga can be destroyed in the matter of minutes, then what is the point of even collecting it anymore? So I didn't. I stopped collecting manga. I didn't buy anything up until I was like 26 or 27. And I thought, no, it's just not worth it. If I can lose my collection as instantly as that, why even bother? So then basically what got me back into collecting manga again is that for Christmas of, I think it was 2017, my fiance Ellie actually got me just a whole bunch of manga. She got me some Golden Kamuy, she got me the Judy Tyson light novel, and she got me the first 4 volumes of Black Clover. And I remember opening the Christmas present and just thumbing through all these books, and I thought, wow, This is the exact feeling I had when I bought my first manga. And at the time, I was a few years into my career, I was making some pretty good money, and I thought, you know what? Now is a good time to start my manga collection up again. So I created a blog for reviewing manga called Uchuu Shelf, which is not around anymore. I took it down for a number of reasons, one of which it ended up being hacked. And it was just a pain in the ass to just kind of dig through, clean up, and then put back on. It was just ended up not being worth it in the end. So what I would do is I would go to the bookstore pretty much every Friday, and I would buy one volume of something, 1 or 2 volumes of something, 1 or 5 volumes of something. And I would review it on my blog, and eventually by that time I collected about 40 or 50 manga. And I knew I had to slow down because I knew I would have to move it all from Canada to the UK, which is another story, but a huge pain in the ass. But manga also pretty much got me into content creating, because when I was creating the Uchuu Shelf blog, I was reached out to by Crunchyroll, who said, hey, we came across your blog, do you want to come write about anime for us? And I said, hell yeah. So I wrote about anime on Crunchyroll for the better part of 2018. That ended up not going the way I wanted it to. I ended up going to write for J-List for a while. And then that just kind of fizzled out because I got entirely too busy with work. And then May of 2019, I met a whole bunch of people on Twitter. Someone had followed me. I ended up following a whole bunch of people. I saw that there was kind of a community for, creating videos about manga. And at the time, I was reading more manga than I'd ever read in my entire life, even when I was reading scanlations. So it just kind of clicked in my head. It all kind of made sense. Like, I was reading a lot of manga. I like creating content. I've always wanted to make YouTube videos. So I made YouTube videos, and here we are. You're sitting here watching a video with my ugly mug on the screen, and thank you for putting up with that. But that is the origin story of Uchuu Shelf, if you will. Basically, how I got into manga, and basically, it's just so weird to think that because I missed the bus, went into a comic book store, and bought this. This is where I am today, in terms of manga. So, what's next for my collection? I'm not sure. I'm trying to slow down collecting stuff because we're considering moving in the next year. And I do not want to pack all this up and move it. That's just going to be a pain in the ass that I want nothing of. I want to wash my hands of and just never do. If one of you guys out there is an Uchuu Shelf superfan, hit me up. You guys can move my stuff for me. But I have a lot planned for my manga collection and for the channel going forward for sure. Biggest shakeup on the channel is that by the end of the year, I will be reviewing French manga. So you're going to see a little bit of bilingual Uchuu Shelf. You're going to see a little bit of Salut mes amis, Sacte Uchuu Shelf ici. I have mentioned before that I've been relearning French and I'm still doing it, still working on it. It is not a hard language to learn because I grew up in Canada, so French was kind of compulsory up to grade 9, and then I said, never mind, no more French for this guy. And regret that every day of my life. So the first place this new adventure in my manga collection is going to take me is Taiyo Matsumoto's number 5. I bought the 2 French omnibuses that are released by Kana, and I purchased these because some of my old collection included the first 2 English volumes of number 5, which sold very poorly, might I add, and are probably one of the most hard manga to find, most out-of-print manga to find, because there was only a limited run of the 2 volumes. And those 2 volumes only covered a quarter of the series, so it was something I read, and ever since I read that, I was like, man, what's next? And I could just go read it on scans, but there's something about pushing myself to learn a language specifically to read a manga that is just so motivating to me, knowing that once I kind of get up to a point where I can read French and only have to reference a few words in a dictionary or on Google Translate, that there's a whole other world of manga out there. And it's something that is just going to elevate myself as a content creator, elevate myself as a manga fan, because France is the second biggest market for manga. It gets so much more manga than we will ever get, more manga than we'll ever see. And it just seems ridiculous to not just capitalize on that, but to push myself to, of course, learn French specifically to enjoy that stuff, instead of just waiting and waiting and waiting for manga to come out here. But anyways, folks, that's my journey as a manga fan, how I got into manga, and where it took me, and where it's possibly going to take me and the channel. I'd love to hear how you all got into manga. If you guys want to make a video about this, definitely do and tag me in it so I can see how you got into manga, because I love hearing stories about how people got into it. Manga is just... I put a tweet out the other day that said, God damn, manga is cool. And a lot of people agreed with it. There's no other way to put it. Manga is goddamn cool. And as always, don't forget to support legal manga. Go to www.wherecanireadmanga.com to get the lowdown on where you can read manga for free, through a subscription, or per volume, and do it all in a way that supports the manga industry. But until next time, folks, happy reading.